Thank you for being patient. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Sidney Franklin, Jeff Moore, Patrick Morris, Michael Pate, Jorge Sotolongo, Dave Rosacker, Vice Chair, and I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanslau, Planning Director, Eric England, Assistant Planning Director, Mike Carter, Current Planning Manager, Jennifer Taylor of the City Law Department, and Debbie Hightower is our Recording Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. Are they still there, Eric?
We'll grab it.
Okay, we'll get some more. You're welcome to come down and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases have been recommended for layover, have been heard or perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. This case will then be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you'll have the opportunity to come to the podium, clearly state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant. After the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed, and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please clearly state your name, address, and whom you're representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has been previously said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please turn off your cell phones. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they're made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well to the rest of the public. A current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act can be found in a white binder in this room. And there's no changes to the consent cases, so I'm going to get started with the reading. There's 22 of them, so it's going to take a little bit here to get through them. Agenda item number 2, case C12-22-61, applicant John Alexander. It is on for layover. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Sycamore Farms, a minor plat outside city limits with a waiver to section 5399 sidewalks. This was laid over from the March meeting. Location, northeast of River Road Drive and Dodge Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 3, case C12-22-244. Applicant Sean Negus. It is Ponca Trails LLC. It is on for layover. Request preliminary plat approval of Ponca Trails, a subdivision outside city limits with a waiver to section 5382G pavement width, 5399 sidewalks, 5382B cul-de-sac length, 5393 street surfacing to allow asphalt pavement and to waive installation of curb and gutter, 5396 storm sewers, and 53-910 streetscape standards to reduce street lighting standards. This was laid over from the September meeting, location 14222 Calhoun Road. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 4, case C8-22-72, applicant John Alexander. It is on for layover request, approval of a special use permit to allow a campground in the AG. Property is located within the floodway overlay district. This was also laid over from our March meeting. Location, northeast of River Road and Dodge Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 5, case C8-22-255, C7-22-259. Applicant Sean Negus, Ponca Trails LLC, on for layover request. Approval of a special use permit to allow development located within the North Hills Environmental Resource Overlay District, along with approval of a major amendment to presumed conditional use permit pursuant to section 55-883Q to allow a stable in the DR district. This was laid over from the September meeting. Location 14222 Calhoun Road. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 9, case C3-22-265, applicant Nick and Amy Klein. It is on for approval. Request approval of an amendment to the future land use element of the city's master plan to change the future land use designation from civic to office commercial. Location, northwest of 204th Street and Laramie Road. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 10, case C10-22-13, C12-22-14, applicant Celebrity Homes Omaha. It is on for approval. Request revised preliminary and final plat approval of Stratford West, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. Location southwest of 171st Street and Military Road. Anyone wish to have this removed?
I would, yes.
Okay, that will be removed. That's case number 10. Okay. Agenda item number 11, case C10-22-267, C12-22-268. Applicant 18818 Fort LLC. It is on for approval. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Enclave Flats Replat 1, a minor plat inside city limits with rezoning from DR and R4 to DR and R4. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 12, case C10-22-269, C12-22-270. Applicant Sullivan Development Company. It is on for approval. Request preliminary plat approval of the Villas at Pine Creek Woods, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R5. Location southwest of 156th and Potter Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, I will remove it. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 13, case C10-22-271, applicant Manuel Fernandez, MG Fern Properties, LLC. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from GI to R5. Location 2212 Poppleton Ave. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 14, case C10-22-272. Applicant John Schmidt, the Historic Florentine LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of the repeal of the ACI Area of Civic Importance Overlay District. Location 907 South 25th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 15, case C10-96-45, applicant John Dosler. It is on for, John Dosler, Hy-Vee. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for Huntington Park. Location 3410 North 156th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 16, case C10-20-45, applicant Woodsonian North Streams LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for North Streams. Location northeast of 204th and Q Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 17, case C10-98-71, applicant 180 Drexel LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for Falcon Ridge. Location 18011 Drexel Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay. It will be removed. That's agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 18, case C10-22-273, C10-21-23. Applicant KJ Crossroads Venture LLC. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from GC and MU to MU with approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for the Crossroads. Property is located within the ACI 2 overlay district. Location southwest of 72nd and Cass Streets. Anyone want to see this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 19, case C10-99-132. Applicant Sullivan Development Company LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for Center Ridge. Location northwest of 192nd Street and West Center Road. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 20, case C10-22-274, applicant Good Homes Co. LLC. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from CC to R8. Location 7270 Cedar Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 21, case C7-22-275, C10-22-276, C11-22-277. Applicant Nick and Amy Klein. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from R5 to GO with approval of the Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District. Approval of a conditional use permit to allow multifamily residential in the GO district, and approval of a planned unit development overlay district, along with a waiver of section 55-587, minimum site area to allow for a PUD district less than 1 acre. Location northwest of 204th Street and Laramie Road. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 22, case C11-22-132, C7-22-133. Applicant AVG Partners 1 LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of a planned unit redevelopment overlay district, along with approval of a conditional use permit to allow multiple family residential in the CC district. Location 2718 North 118th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 23, case C8-22-278, applicant Dan Smith. It is on for approval. Request approval of a special use permit to allow development in the ED North Hills Environmental Resources Overlay District. Location 5220 Wedge Court. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. We're getting there. Agenda item number 25, case C7-22-280, applicant Nancy A. Armburst Trust. It is on for approval. Request approval of a conditional use permit to allow a farmstead lot in the AG district. Location 8902 North 216th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 27, case C7-22-164. Applicant Catherine Jensen. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the conditional use permit to allow a kennel in the DR district. Property is located in the ED North Hills Environmental Resources Overlay District. Location 6512 and 6524 Garvin Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 28, case C14-22-283. Applicant, property owners. It is on for approval. Request approval of the vacation of the east-west alley located north of Pinckney Street and west of 75th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. For the cases on consent that are on for approval, do we have a motion?
Move to approve case numbers 9, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 25, 27, and 28.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
For the cases on consent for layover, do we have a motion?
Motion to lay over cases 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Franklin?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Those cases that were on consent, if they were left on consent, they've been voted on. No further action on those cases will be taken today. If you were here for one of those cases, you are welcome to stay, or you are free to leave. It's up to you. We'll get started. The first case is administrative only. That means there'll be no opportunity for any public testimony. Agenda item number 1, case C10-20-86, C12-20-87. Applicant Charleston Homes LLC. Request final plat approval of Arbor View lots 534 through 641, Outlot N, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R4. Location northwest of 210th Street and Grand Avenue. Eric.
Yeah, so this is the second phase, which includes 108 single-family lots, 1 outlot. The first phase final plat was approved by City Council in April of 2021. Just one comment to make. The recording of this final plat and/or the issuance of building or plumbing permits will be withheld until the construction of the new interceptor sewer, which serves this subdivision, is completed. With that being said, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and R4. Approval of the final plat subject to the 4 conditions in the report prior to City Council.
Any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I move approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and R4 and approval of the final plat subject to addressing the 4 conditions outlined in the recommendation report prior to forwarding the request onto City Council for final action.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Moving ahead to agenda item number 6, case C3-22-264. Applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the square TIF redevelopment project plan. Location 3001 Leavenworth Street. And Don, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah,
Bet.
Don Seaton, City Planning Department. The square apartments are located at 30th and Leavenworth. There are 4 parcels in this project that are being combined into one for the construction of a new 4-story apartment building with 73 market rate apartments. The 4 lots, looking at this oblique aerial that looks to the southeast, are mostly vacant. There's one building That will be raised. It's presently occupied by a tattoo parlor. Again, this is 73 market rate apartments, 4 stories. It'll have about 131 parking stalls. 51 of those will be located inside the structure. We have some elevations. The developer is MRES Square Owner, LLC. It's managed by Adam Kirschenbaum. The total project investment in the neighborhood is about $18.1 million. They are requesting $1,835,438 in TIF program support. I'd note that this project is also in the influence area of the Urban Core Housing and Mobility Plan. That means that a portion of the new excess ad valorem tax revenues, the TIF revenues, that are generated by the increment, a portion of those will go to the streetcar system. This project is also located in a designated extremely blighted area, an EBA. That means that the project that we're looking at a 20-year term for the TIF for this project. This project meets the required criteria of the TIF program and has been approved by the TIF committee. It's an appropriate land use for the area. Complies with the goals of the city's master plan, and we ask for your approval.
Thank you, Don. Any other proponents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Bob Griffith, Fulham Kim Jobin, and Johnson Beller here on behalf of the applicant, 11440 West Center Road. Thank you, Don, for laying out the project. Great job as always. We appreciate your help in this. I don't have a whole lot to add as far as the details of the TIF. I did want to show a couple images of the current status of the site, just so you have an idea kind of what it looks like as is today. The tattoo parlor Don mentioned, they have relocated, so it's currently vacant. I also wanted to mention the project incorporates a little over $270,000 worth of public improvements. So that's another great aspect of the project that will remove an obvious blight in the neighborhood. So if you have any other further questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Bob. Any other proponents? Okay, seeing none, are there any opponents? No, okay. Seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Additional comments, questions from the board? Eric, did you want to add anything?
The board had previously voted on platting and rezoning of the property. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Morris?
Yes.
Hay?
Yes.
Solongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Yes. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Thanks, Robert.
Agenda item number 7, case C3-22-199. Applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the Greenwood Building TIF redevelopment project plan, location 3819 North 24th Street. And Don, you're up again.
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, City Planning Department. The Greenwood Building is at 3819 North 24th Street. It's a long vacant brick historic building, has been owned by the city. The city is relinquishing ownership. It's a building that's also known as the Native Omaha Club. It's about 7,250 square feet in area. This building is going to see a comprehensive rehabilitation. There will also be a 600 square foot addition added to the back of the building, which will allow for an expanded commercial kitchen. Commercial kitchen will be on the main level. There will be 3 apartment units upstairs with their rents priced with a goal of affordability in mind. Project has a $1 million grant from the Sherwood Foundation and is also receiving city CDBG funds. So the city's kind of a partner in this project. The developer is NOC Redevelopment Group, LLC. It's managed by Kyle Keith and Katrina Adams. They're Spark Academy graduates. Let me maybe also put up a rendering of what the final building will look like when completed. Total project investment in this North Omaha site is $2,188,000. They're requesting $203,000 in TIF program support. I would note that this building is also located in an designated extremely blighted area where it meets the program criteria for the 20-year TIF term. It's an appropriate land use for the area, complies with the city's master plan goals. We ask for your approval.
Thank you, Don. Any other proponents wishing to speak?
Good afternoon to the board and the chairman. I just want to come up again, say thank you for considering this application for
Need
TIF.
your name and address.
Kyle Keith, 2210 West Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I was so excited. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
It's been a long process, but it's been a worth it process. As you guys can, as Don said before, it's been a long vacant building. Has a historical significance for our community, as you guys know. And we're very excited to be able to put this building to use for the community and spur more development in the area. I'm here for any kind of question you guys might have. I appreciate your consideration.
Hey, Kyle.
Okay, thank you.
Is that going to be a restaurant, or is that going to be kind of a catering? Is that for the?
So it's going to be a restaurant. So our concept with the diner is going to be on the south bay on the first floor. What our concept is to have a Panera style environment Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday we'll have a full restaurant breakfast menu for people to come in. So bring your grandparents and bring your kids. No problem.
How come the middle residential unit, just 1 bedroom, but looks like it's about the same size as the 2 end units that are 2 bedroom? I'm just more curious than anything.
We just kind of wanted to mix it up, to be honest. We wanted to try to attract, not only families, but young individuals that might be able to, rent something that was 1 bedroom and start, building roots in the community. So we wanted to, as flexible as 3 units can be, to try to attract as many different, groups of families and stuff like that down to the area. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Additional comments, questions from the board? Eric, did you want to add?
Just, as Don had mentioned, the property transfer was just recently approved. The rezoning of the property is also going through that process as well. So we're excited to see redevelopment of this building and improve the area.
Okay.
Staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Pate,
Yes.
Solongo,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Franklin. Yes. Moore.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Approve 7-0.
Agenda item number 8, case C3-15-283, applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of an amendment to the Uptown District TIF redevelopment project plan. Location, various locations. And Don, your final case.
Yes, the last of the 3 TIF items. Don Seaton, City Planning Department. This project or this item on your agenda is in some ways largely an administrative item to kind of clean up things. The Uptown District is a multiple phase, multiple site redevelopment project that was approved in 2015 and then amended again in 2017. And it was largely it was completely for sale units, primarily row homes. This amendment is to take out the phase 3 sites and the phase 4 sites. So we're amending the plan to reduce the number of sites. On the existing Uptown District approved plan that I am displaying here, the 3 sites in blue are the phase 3 sites that will be removed from the Uptown District by virtue of this amendment. These 2 up here you may recall seeing as the Diggs Apartments, a TIF project that you guys recently approved and is going to City Council at this point. The 3rd parcel is being removed. 3rd phase 3 parcel is also being removed. It will come back to you folks as a standalone TIF project. For phase 4, that's the yellow sites, 3 sites. We also have the developer's description of the ultimate disposition of those 6 sites. These 3 yellow, the one at 825 Park Avenue is going to be sold off. The other 2 further south, those are going to be donated to In Common. And it's pretty straightforward, and we ask for your approval.
Thank you, Don. Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Comments, questions from the board? Eric,
Recommend approval.
do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to agenda item number 10, which was on for consent. It was moved off. It's case C10-22-13, C12-22-14. Applicant, Celebrity Homes Omaha. Request, revised preliminary and final plat approval of Stratford West, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. Location, southwest of 171st Street and Military Road.
Good afternoon,
From the
Mr. Chair,
applicant.
members of the board. My name is Mark Johnson. My address is 11440 West Center Road, appearing today on behalf of the applicant. With me today is Caleb Van Wielden from Lamper Nearson. They're the civil engineers for the project. As you know, this case was on the consent agenda, so I will, let the gentleman who pulled it off come up here now and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? And we'll need your name and address, sir, please.
Yes. Tom Lauritsen, 17306 Military Road, Bennington, Nebraska 68007. I live directly across from the property. I was here at the city council when the original plat was approved. Thought at that time there was more than enough lots. If you're familiar with the area, there's a new junior high and a new grade school relatively close. Traffic has increased substantially. It's my understanding, I tried to call the person on this letter that I got. He was out of town, but when I called the city planning, it's my understanding that they just added 16 lots to their original plat, and I'm wondering what the necessity for another 16 lots would be. Bennington School District right now is certainly trying to adjust to the growth in the area. Hopefully we will pass another bond issue in November. There'll be a high school built probably 6 blocks west of where I live, but I guess I'm questioning what's the need for another 16 lots? Just more money? It certainly doesn't aesthetically approve the development, and they've started work. I've been eating their dust for the last 40 days, 7 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 at night. At what point is enough enough? How much money do they need to make? What's the reason for the additional 16 lots? I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Tom, just one, I assume you live directly south of this development?
I live directly north. I have 10 acres.
Oh, you have an acreage, okay.
I sit up on the hill. I'll get to view it.
Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other opponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Mark, did you want to come up and address Tom's issues?
You bet.
With the additional lots and the dust, please?
I'll yield the floor to Caleb for that one.
Okay.
I can muddle my way through and pretend, but I think he'll give you a
All
more
right.
technical answer. Again, Mark Johnson, 11440 West Center Road. I'm going to put up the preliminary plat here so everyone can see the difference between the preliminary plat that was approved or recommended for approval by the planning board in January of this year. My eyes aren't as good as they once were here. So you can see that's the original preliminary plat. And this gentleman, Mr. Lauritsen, is correct. The revised preliminary plat does include now 236 lots instead of 220. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, we added these, I have a pointer here, these 5 lots here on the east side of 171st Street. Celebrity Homes in the process of purchasing some remnant parcels from Bennington Public Schools, which developed the school to the east. They had some leftover outlots that are now being incorporated into this preliminary plat at this time, so those are those 5 lots. We also added a few lots up here as a result of the fact that we, instead of connecting to 171st Street, we added a cul-de-sac because of the large amount of fill that was required to make that connection to 171st Street. And then there's just some minor lot configuration changes that resulted in additional lots. All of these lots meet the zoning requirements of the R4 zoning, and that's about it. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you,
And
Mark.
the dust is, we're grading out there, so we have all the required, well, I'll let Caleb go.
Yeah, it's been a dry summer, but
Yep.
yeah, we need to have water as we're grading, so.
Caleb Van Wielden with Lampreneerson, 147110 West Dodge Road. Talk a little bit about the dust. We are actively grading out there. We had the dust complaint that came across my desk, I believe, a week ago. And shortly after, we passed that along to the contractor to make sure they have water available or putting down wet dirt on the haul roads. We all acknowledge it's been a dry summer, but I do hear your concern about the constant dust.
The dust complaint didn't come from me. This is my first complaint on the dust.
Okay, understood. We are meeting, the site is being actively inspected by both Lampreneerson and the City of Omaha inspectors, and we are complying with their recommendations in their SWIP report.
Okay. Who's your grading contractor? Is that McCardle?
It's McCardle,
Okay.
yep, who's been doing
Yeah,
business
those
for
are
a very long
quality
time.
people. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions from the board? Okay, Eric?
Yeah, so I just have a few comments. The planning board saw the previous phase 1 earlier this year that did not proceed to city council, due to the changes that were proposed. They decided to bring it all back. Because of those additional 16 lots in the cul-de-sac, we thought a revised preliminary plat was necessary. So that is why that is on the agenda along with the final plat. The applicant has acknowledged they're continuing to work with the property owner in the southwest portion of the site regarding the extension of Rachel Snowden Parkway. So that's one of the conditions, and will need to be adequately addressed before ultimately the recording of the final plat. There's no lot size waivers or anything like that. Without knowing the exact numbers of all the lot dimensions, it could be more dense. We are supportive of the housing and the number that is proposed. I do acknowledge there is a lot of change out in this area. There's a lot of growth and a lot of housing, a lot of developments that are taking place. So that is definitely true.
Eric, if Tom has if there's dust, who does he call for a complaint?
Yeah, that's our Public Works.
Okay.
They deal with the grading permits, so we have a division that deals.
That number's
with
on
that.
the website.
Yep, that's on the city's website, or Tom could reach out, or whoever had concerns, they could reach out to planning or Public Works. We can get them to the right division.
Okay.
Unless there's any other questions, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to R4, approval of the revised preliminary plat subject to the 22 conditions, and approval of the final plat subject to submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to city council.
Do we have a motion?
A motion for approval of the rezoning from AG to R4, approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 22 conditions in the recommendation report, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval prior to forwarding to city council.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Mr. Chair?
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes.
Approved 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 12, that was on consent for approval, taken off. It's case C10-22-269, C12-22-270. Applicant Sullivan Development Company request preliminary plat approval of the villas at Pine Creek Woods, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R5. Location, southwest of 156th and Potter Streets. Do we have the applicant? Here. Is the applicant? Okay.
I don't want to kick him out.
Yeah, that's all right.
We'll go first.
Oh.
He'll, okay. Sorry, guys.
We haven't done this before.
No, you were good. Don't worry
They were
about
gonna make my job really easy.
Yeah,
We'll
you
be
can-
Make our job.
Yeah, just have a seat in the front row and you'll be up in a minute here.
Brent Beller, 11440 West Center Road. On behalf of the applicant, Sullivan Development Company, with me today is Charlie Sullivan, the developer, along with Kyle Hasse with E&A. They're in charge of our civil and site layout on this project. Real quick, I know this was on consent agenda, but I do want to go over what we're actually doing out here. If this turns on, there we go. Okay, so this is 156. To the north of us is State Street. To the south of us is Ida. This is the new OPS school that recently opened. This is the 12-acre tract that we're in the process of developing. So the initial ask of you right now is the preliminary plat. To the north of us is the Pine Creek subdivision. Actually, to the west of us too is actually the same subdivision, Pine Creek. This site is set for a long time. Single family is currently there. They now have listed their property. Mr. Sullivan was able to get that under contract, so that's why we're before you today. So what's being proposed is same direction, north, west, south, east, is 40 sort of single family, 3-bedroom, market rate townhomes. I think what you'll see, especially with the economy and everything else we're living in these days, is more of these for rental units in a new subdivision will be coming online. We see a lot of that in what we're doing right now, only because with interest rates going up, first-time home buyers, families alike, and retirees, they want a product like this. So 40 of these townhome type developments. As you can see, we're going to tie into Potter Street. This will be our main exit. There'll be no entrance onto 156th Street. This will be a private drive. There will be an HOA that maintains all the yards, the snow removal, all that sort of good stuff. And then, of course, there's going to be street connections. So currently, this street right here off of Craig Ave is stubbed. We will have that connectivity, which obviously Public Works and you all know that we support that. In the development community, we go along with the city staff's recommendation for connectivity. This road is actually paved. But there's a dead end right here. So OPS actually paved this road. This lot, you heard this in the last matter as well, this lot was actually for sale. So we had a public neighborhood meeting last week, and one of the criticisms that we did receive was actually we had some proposed plans for this lot. Some of the neighbors, just because of backyards and townhomes, they didn't like that, so we took that off. It was good for us, but we don't have to do that to make this work. The other thing that's important for this particular site is just the tree canopy. So to make this connection, this is a waterway. So we have a 3:1+20 setback in here. It's a pretty steep grade though as you come down to that bank, and so the connectivity here requires a little bit of removal of these trees. And so one of the things that all developers have to comply with is the tree mitigation study that the city requires. So there is some trees being removed here. But then in conjunction therewith, and that's, by the way, that's because we have to elevate that roadway a little bit. There's a slope that has to come in so those trees come out. Wish we didn't have to do that, but we do. But there's 76 new trees being planted that will back all these areas by the rear entries of those homes. So again, we have to comply with that. That's a city requirement. We'll do that. And then real quick, just to give you an idea of what Mr. Sullivan's actually proposing here, these are some general schematics of what these units will look like. So these are high-end, nice type products that people can feel proud about being there. Again, it offers a new entry-level product for folks or retirees or somebody that just doesn't want to do yard maintenance. And so this is the front entry. These will all have 2 garages, 3 bedrooms. And then in the rear, nice walkout, individual patios. So kind of a really cool product. This property is sat, I mean, it's been a single family residential, acreage for years. And so this is a good reuse of it. The town-owned concept is something, again, I think you're going to see more and more of, especially in this interest rate climate. So with that, we're here for any questions.
HOA is going to take care of all maintenance?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything they're not taking care of. Okay.
Okay, just so I understand that lot on the curved street there that you were talking to
This one?
Yes.
Yep.
Where's that lot go?
So that's an OPS lot. We don't own
Okay.
it. We were going to try and buy it and develop
Gotcha.
it.
All right.
But again, listening to neighborhood, this is why you do the neighborhood meetings. There was some sensitivity about that, so we scrapped it.
All right. I misunderstood you, so, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Any other proponents wishing to speak?
Kyle Hazy with E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road. Just to make a slight correction, so we did have 40 total units on the project, and then once we moved that portion out of that corner, and then we are down to 36 now. So I just want to make that noted.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Now, sir, you can come up.
My name is Philip Phillips, and for the benefit of those who just heard that, it really is Philip Phillips. And I live at 16006 Potter Street, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Pine Creek Villa Townhome Association. With me is Rick Stanger.
Richard L. Stanger, 7507 North 160th Street in the Pine Valley Villas.
And we're not necessarily opponents by any sense of the word. We had a very nice meeting on the 28th of September with Charlie and his engineers and discussed the development. And we reviewed the development plan, and we like it with one exception. There's always got to be that one exception. And that's the connection between the street, why am I blanking?
That's all right.
Or Stub Street, Hanover Street.
Hanover Street.
I always want to call it something else. The little Stub Street, Hanover Street, which goes into the OPS property, was extended to the line of the development. Without that Stub Street, the development would still have 2 points of access. And the reason we don't appreciate the Hanover Street entrance is our subdivision essentially is a cul-de-sac. It would bring traffic onto that cul-de-sac, and there's no logical place for it to go. It's neighborhood streets for half a mile, whether you're going to 156 or 168 or Ida or State. Anyone who gets there is lost. And we think that access and emergency access would be taken care of by the 2 other exits, which are onto a street which is more designed for through traffic, which our little subdivision street is not.
Yeah, directly behind there are villas, and the majority of people in there are retired, such as myself.
And myself.
Yes, and so we're looking just to kind of protect our little world is what we're after here.
And I guess, like I said, this is not necessarily opponents, but
Right.
When we had our meeting, I think Charlie said that he would be willing to consider whether that Stub Street extension was necessary for his development plan. And if it's not necessary, I guess our position is, why do it? It's going to cost him money, and it's going to bring traffic into our neighborhood, so we don't really see any benefit to that. So we're hoping, with Mr. Sullivan's concurrence, that could be removed from the development plan and let the rest of it stand.
Just a second, Philip.
Yeah.
The street you're talking, point to it so I make sure certain. Was that always a Stub Street?
It's this dead-ended right here
Yeah.
until the Westview High School was constructed.
Yep.
And then, frankly, it was the city planning department that asked that this little stub, it's a couple hundred feet at most, be constructed to the property line of the OPS school. It doesn't serve the high school. There's
Okay.
no parking on that. There's
That's
no
the
sidewalks.
street you're against, that curved street. the
Well,
stub.
the curve street is there, but
It's there.
Okay.
The connection is probably what we object to.
The connection to the west.
no, the connection. Well, the connection between
West
between the
and east.
subdivision and our area, because that's going to bring 36 townhomes of traffic through residential streets, which were never designed to serve through traffic.
Okay.
So if it's not needed, we just feel like why build it, and it would be a real negative for us.
I thought you were talking about the street going north. Is
No,
what I thought
this
you
one,
were.
and
Yeah, because that was always a Stub Street there.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other? Okay. Any other opponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, close public hearing. You want to come up and give you a chance to
Brent Beller, 1140 West Center Road. Can't say that we necessarily disagree, but at the same time, I mean, these connections are not dictated by, these are stub streets. This particular street, though, this was actually, it's currently there, and OPS paved it. It's common practice in our city for connectivity. Generally speaking, the development community always supports connectivity. And so, yes, this 159th Street is an added cost to us. That will be a public street that we have to dedicate. This culvert over 159th Street to provide this connectivity is probably $250,000, $300,000 to our ledger. So in a perfect world, yeah, we wouldn't do it, but we don't. I mean, this is the world we live in. This is part of development. Connectivity is supported. I know that the city always appreciates connectivity. Our road, I'll say it again, this is actually a privately maintained road. So two things to be important. I mean, not only do we have the cost of this that we have to pay for, the ongoing maintenance of this, we'll have a maintenance agreement with the county to share in that. And again, that's a private expense. The reality is our property line's right here. We can't stop OPS from doing and opening that street. We can't stop the city from doing that. But we will follow the requirements to provide that connectivity. So probably not the answer they wanted to hear, but it is the answer.
Right now, that street does not connect anywhere to the OPS property.
That's right. It's literally it's stubbed to our property line.
So that, to me, that would be the bigger concern, I would think, with high school traffic coming in and out of it, or go back. But OPS can do that if
They can, and they did. Yeah. I don't know, and I shouldn't speak out of turn. I don't know that they will remove the barriers. So there's fence barriers there right now. And maybe city staff can opine whether or not that has to be open once we provide that connectivity.
Did I close the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Well, I was gonna respond because there was
Just a sec,
there's
Phil.
misunderstanding.
Once I close the public hearing, and if a board member requests you to come up, then you can come up. So, does anybody in the board want to hear from Philip? Jeff does, so come on up. You gotta
I
state
guess,
your name and address again.
Yeah, again, Philip D. Phillips, 16006 Potter Street, officially Bennington. The stub street that was built through the OPS property was not built at their request. As a matter of fact, I have a incredibly strongly worded letter from the superintendent of schools, which you may be familiar of, opposing that. So the school district didn't want it. The school district is not really in favor of having traffic come through their property to a subdivision, because that can generate all kinds of issues in terms of student access in inappropriate places and so forth. So
I think what the developer is saying is that they don't have any choice.
That's already been there, and that they have to comply with the connectivity that the city is requiring. And
so
it's
what you're
not,
saying is
it's
the
not
city-
them.
the
It's
city is
city.
requiring it, and I
Yes.
guess our question is why?
I think Eric will address.
Yeah, we'll give Eric a chance to try and adjust.
Yeah, because we've never heard an explanation, because it goes from, we call it the road to nowhere,
Not
because it
anymore.
goes from nowhere to nowhere.
Not anymore.
And it doesn't, not anymore, but it's the road for no reason, and we would be interested in hearing why.
Okay, thank you, Philip. All right, any additional comments or questions? Eric?
Yeah, so obviously
There you go.
we have Public Works here as well that can come up and make commentary. It's extremely important to connect neighborhoods to neighborhoods. We sat here for 5 hours last month talking about traffic and connection and the importance of connecting neighborhoods. If we say, no, just leave that neighborhood alone, we won't connect it to the next neighborhood. Trust me, there are plenty of poor examples at a time probably in the 60s and 70s that we platted in our jurisdiction that have dozens of cul-de-sacs. It has very poor connectivity. It's a nightmare. It's expensive to maintain that road infrastructure. You have to go out of your way if you want to visit a friend that lives perhaps 4 or 5 blocks over. So yes, the street extension that was required of Omaha Public Schools was an extension of a street stub that was put in place in the neighborhood. Just like, so we had 2 street stubs that were always intended to go through. This wasn't just some isolated, oh, we just place those there. It was always intended to connect into a street network. You know, why should, like I said, if somebody lives 4 or 5 blocks away, why should they have to go out to 156th Street, higher speeds? We know that there's more dangerous and more deadly vehicle crashes when you go out to the arterial streets. You're adding air pollution for unnecessary miles when you can just connect to your neighborhood. The addition of 36 townhome units will not have an overall impact on, you know, the street network or the neighborhoods when you look at it. So I guess I would just kind of throw it out there as that summary. I'd invite Ryan Haas from Public Works to come down if he has anything to add. I'll leave that up to him. I don't know if that answered your question, but you know, these neighborhoods were always intended to connect, and it was not a street that was placed to nowhere. As far as the barricading, that is a city street, so it's my understanding that Public Works would go remove those barricades once this development goes through, but I'd have to defer to the language that was in the subdivision agreement with when Omaha Public Schools came in.
It looks like Ryan's gonna come down and address that, so.
I'm going to add a few things while we're waiting for Ryan to come down. Dave Fanslaw, City Planning. It is true that when OPS platted their ground for the school, the city required the extension of that stub street. I'm going to imagine that OPS has that blocked off because, well, they're not supposed to because, like Eric said, it's a public street. But I'm going to guess they probably have that blocked off because it is a road to nowhere and they probably don't want people congregating back there. But once that street is connected like it was always intended to, obviously the barricades will be removed, and maybe OPS's concern about that famous road to nowhere will go away. Also keep in mind that you can look at, and the board, you know this, but I want to put on public record, you can look at any subdivision done in the last 20 or 30 years all over our jurisdiction, and you will see a number of these stub streets, and Eric is correct, and Ryan's gonna say the same thing, is they were always intended to go somewhere else. We build the city based on a network of streets that interconnect. We have our mile grid. We do not want everyone going out to those mile grid streets to go to see their neighbor or to make those local trips. We want to keep those local trips within that mile grid. Last thing I'll say is, I mentioned all of those stub streets. We have a map. I don't have it with me. There's hundreds of these stub streets all over the place, again, for that connectivity. But think if we quit connecting those and all the public money we've wasted on installing those stub streets, it would be not in the best interest, financial interest of the city, nor would it be in the best connectivity interest of the city and the citizens not to connect those streets. Thanks.
Oh, Ryan's here. I was gonna make a point. I'll wait for Ryan.
Ryan Haas with the Public Works Department. Just want to echo the sentiment of Dave, and Eric did a great job of summarizing the connectivity importance. It is possible, there have been past instances, similar instances, where we had a stub street where the land use took a while to develop. The street pavement happened first, and Douglas County actually went out and barricaded off to try to prevent delinquents. So it's possible they may have been or given approval for that barricading, but certainly once the street connects or the adjacent land use fills in, then those barricades are removed and the street is open for traffic.
I was just gonna say that in the time that I've been on the board, 13 years or something, I think we've always voted on the stub streets to be connected into the neighborhoods that they were meant to be connected in. Not always, but I'd say 7 or 8 times out of 10, usually neighborhoods don't like that. It's their neighborhood. We don't want any additional traffic coming into our neighborhood. The way I've always dealt with it is I always think of children that are either walking or riding their bicycles and they want to go visit a friend. Like in this case, we don't want them running out to 156th or running out to a busier street. We want to have connectivity and make it safer for everybody. Children, mothers, fathers going to pick up their kids after school, and that connectivity is what the city strives for. and I think it's important. The public hearing's been closed, Philip, I'm sorry. So,
Okay, but I'll just point out there's been
Philip,
inaccuracies stated here.
you're not allowed to say anything more, so. Okay, any other comments, questions from the board? Okay, did you want to add anything,
Just
Eric?
the recommendation, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and R5, approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 15 conditions.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and R5 and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 15 conditions outlined in the recommendation. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Sotolongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Moving on, agenda item number 17, case C10-98-71. Applicant 180 Drexel LLC. This was on consent for approval. It was pulled off. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use development agreement for Falcon Ridge. Location 18011 Drexel Street. Is the applicant here? Okay, come on down.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Cizek. It's AIMEECIZEK. I'm an attorney at McGill Gottsteiner Law Firm, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 180 Drexel LLC, owned by Rob Woodling, who would typically be here and usually represents himself at these things, but he was not able to make it today. So I am here on his behalf. I also have the engineer in case anyone has any questions. We have a bit of a time constraint with...
Could you put your microphone just a little further?
Sure. We have a bit of a time constraint with our engineer, so because this is on the consent agenda, I'm going to step aside and let the neighbors voice their concerns, and then if the engineer can address those, I'll let him do that, and then I'll come back and address any other questions.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak right now? Seeing none, I'll open it up to the opponents.
Gerald Johnson, 17534 V Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68135. I got a lot of comments and everything, but I'm going to be short with this. I just think that what they're proposing next to the middle school there, Reader, it's just going to be too much traffic in the area. I have my personal views about multiplex and everything else, but I am not going to go into that at this time. Can I make one comment? I sometimes wish that they would build these things when they start the development instead of having the everybody gets their houses in there and then they put it up. That's a different thing. What I'm saying is I don't think it's a good idea with the middle school there. My grandkids are going to be going there. I'm not in the neighborhood. I live by that neighborhood, and I've been there 28 years. And I just don't think it's a good idea next to the middle school. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other opponents?
Good afternoon. My name's Ken Stevens, and I live at 6203 South 184th Street in Falcon Ridge. I didn't know, how do I do the map thing here? That's cool.
He'll turn it on.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Zoom in on the top, sir.
Pardon me?
There's a zoom on the top.
Oh.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. I'm here on behalf of the Harvey Oaks, or Harvey Oaks, used to be Harvey Oaks, Falcon Ridge Homeowners Association. And I'm here today to object to the waiver on the parking requirement. You can see the lot size there. That's 180th Street here, Harrison Street here. This is a storage unit here. This is the lot where they're proposing to build this apartment building. And this is Beetle Middle School and Drexel Street running along there. So our objection is to the waiver on the number of required parking stalls for this apartment building. This is proposed to be 50 two-bedroom apartment units. Now, 2 bedrooms, you could have 1 person, you could have 2 people, maybe up to 3 people. So let's use the average, maybe 2 people So 2 times 50, simple math, that's 100 people, 100 possible parking stalls. The waiver is to reduce the required number from 100 to 57. Doing the math, I just don't think it works out very well. The basis of the waiver, I think, on behalf of the planning board is that the orientation, the market for this building is age 55 and above, and 40 of the 50 units will be low income. So they're making an assumption that people 55 aren't doing anything but staying home. And age is all relative. I know that. You can see what's happened to me. So 55-year-olds are still active. And despite being oriented towards low income, they probably will still be working a job. I think that anyone who lives in this building is going to need transportation. So I think there's to make an assumption that these people aren't going to be driving is not accurate. The other issue is that low-income people may not have cars. And I don't think that's true either. Low-income people are probably working low-wage jobs. And they'll need transportation to get to those jobs. Particularly in this location, 180th and Q, or Harrison, is 3 miles from the public, from any public transportation. The closest bus service is 156 and Q. That's a 3-mile walk from there to 180th and Harrison. So I don't think that's very feasible for people to be able to do that. So again, I think that 100 parking stalls is probably a good idea for a unit this size. Let me make sure I got all the points I wanted to make. Yes, we also have testimony from my wife, Rhonda Stevens, and I can tell you that from experience, that she's much more convincing than I am.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Rhonda Stevens. I also live at 6203 South 184th Street. Thank you for what you guys do. I don't always agree with you, but I appreciate that you're here working on these kinds of issues. My concerns are about parking and safety with this development. As Ken points out, they're probably not planning for adequate parking. And yeah, your thing is still up here. This being Beetle Middle School, traffic generally flows in and comes out behind the school. And on this section of Drexel, there is no parking on either side of the street. And traffic coming out of this development would go down Drexel. Parking is limited to one side of the street. So I'm concerned about overflow parking on that section of the street. It will be very congested during school drop-off and pickup times. It gives me a lot of concerns for people who do live here to have to walk down this hill in the wintertime to cars that would be some distance from them, since they can't park immediately next to the buildings, even if without parking spaces available. By the way, I don't see any allowance in particular for staff or visitor parking in the plans either. I don't know that for sure, but I'm not noticing that, or handicap stalls are probably included. One of the big concerns, if you know junior high kids, when they're out of school and running around this area, they're darting in and out of these cars all the time anyway. People will have to go this way down the street and then loop back up around to really access a light to conveniently leave the area. So I'm concerned about some traffic congestion all around this area. I believe the school district is also looking into some traffic issues. The biggest concern of all is for emergency vehicles, both for older people living in that kind of development, but in particular for the school. These days we really do have to be concerned about, can emergency vehicles access that building should that ever come up? I think a lot needs to be considered about the parking. Otherwise, I don't think generally people in our neighborhood at all object to this kind of development, where we welcome this kind of scattered site housing. I know that's an old term. So that part of it's not so much of an issue for most of us. It's safety and consideration for congestion for residents and students there. I'm no longer a mother, but if I was a mother having to drop off my kids there and sometimes also at the grade school nearby, to add to that congestion, which is already awful, I would be mad at you if you approved that without more parking.
I'm a grandfather, and one of my grandsons used to attend Beetle, and I had to go through class with my wife to know how I was supposed to come in and out.
Well, you know,
of everything
yeah.
there. But yeah, it does get congested. I was just there on a pickup. When the students are released, it's a little congested. What's that like the rest of the day?
Much of the rest
In the morning when the drop off, but
drop off is the worst nightmare of all. During the rest of the day and during summertime, not so bad. But you would still be having people spill over into parking quite a ways from where they're living. And it's a hill. This area is a hill. So if you're an older person and you have to park down that hill and walk several blocks up the hill to get back into your apartment, that's, we don't need glamour land and covered parking and all that, but to have a parking space convenient to where you're living as a senior citizen, I would think would be pretty crucial.
Rhonda, did I hear you right? Did you say on Drexel there's no parking on one side of the street or both sides of the street? What did you
I
say?
can read the map right.
It's no parking on the north side.
On the north side, okay.
And in one section, it's no parking on either side, up closer to the school, until you get to this driveway. Here, it's no parking either side in that stretch. So it's all going downhill from that, where people would have to flow out to park on just one side of the street.
And there's signs, no parking signs on both sides of the street on that stretch.
On this stretch, there are signs with the arrows going both ways, no parking.
Okay.
And that's really congested there.
Okay.
And it's very congested on the other side. If we add a whole row of cars parked down that street, I worry about students running in and out. We're looking at a safety issue, in addition to the convenience issue for residents. And
It's our residents that are going to be dropping off those kids.
right.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
Rhonda. Any other opponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Your engineer, Amy, were you coming up, or your engineer, or either one? Whoever's going to address the parking issue and traffic issue.
Sure. Hello, Dustin Shropshire, RW Engineering and Surveying, 7525 North 101st Street here in Omaha. All valid questions for a development such as this. And I wanted to touch just on a few of these. As far as the traffic and the parking goes, that seems to be the biggest concern for this development. In the past, the developer has done a number of these types of apartment complexes that are age restricted, catering to that senior community. And what he's seen is that when he complies with the parking requirements, there is a whole sea of concrete out there that increases the imperviousness of the site and really becomes unusable. At this development particularly, we had some conversations with the city about what on-street parking might look like, and through those conversations, the city signaled that maybe it would be better to keep that parking on the site itself. As far as the safety aspect goes for that parking lot, we have incorporated the T-style fire truck turnaround in there. That's going to allow for the fire trucks to get into the lot, be able to maneuver, turn around, and get back out should there be some sort of emergency. As well, access from Drexel Street would also be within the hose length requirements with the fire department. So from those points, we felt we had addressed the parking, but really the reduction in parking comes from the age of the residents that are there. Fixed income or low income sometimes kind of are used synonymously, where a low income person may still be going to work more often or at those peak hours, but we think of this more of as a fixed income type of development for folks. So we are meeting the requirements otherwise, with the exception of that parking, and that was really just spurred by the age of the residents, and typically there are not multiple people living in one unit. If there are, they're sharing one vehicle, and it hasn't been so much of an issue yet to this point. As far as the parking requirements go, I think that kind of addresses why we asked for that reduction in parking, in part also due to the configuration of the site, but more so that the fact that the residents would be seniors and not driving quite as often. There are no, being this is a senior facility, there are no specialized senior services that are going to be included in this building. So there's no medical care, there's no need for staff. There would be one part-time on-site like manager, so to speak, but there would be no additional nurses or doctors that would be coming and visiting. It's not an assisted care facility, rather just a community for senior citizens to not have a younger crowd there sharing a wall with them.
Any questions, comments?
I was curious if Eric could speak to the parking ratios and parking requirements of a typical senior development like this, and how far away from the original ask are they with the 57 spaces? And maybe you could speak to that.
Yep, sure. The zoning code does not differentiate whether it's senior living or just regular market rate or low income regarding multifamily. So it's a specific number that's based on the number of bedrooms. So if you have an efficiency apartment unit, that requires one parking stall on site. If you have a 1-bedroom unit, that requires 1.5 stalls. If you have 2 bedrooms or above, it requires 2 parking spaces per unit. So with the 50 unit, all of them being 2-bedroom, the zoning code would typically require 100 on-site parking stalls. What Dustin had said, or perhaps it was Amy, yes, it is very true. Rob Woodling has done multiple projects of senior living throughout all parts of our city, whether it's in East Omaha, whether it's South Omaha. He did one recently, 132nd and Fort, which I think would be comparable to this. That's not a what you would call a typical hub for transportation and busing routes. So Rob is very familiar and knows the clientele. I guess a question I would maybe present to the applicants, whether it's Amy or Dustin, are there lease, I'm not going to say a covenant, but are there any, regulations in place that just requires, a maximum of 1 vehicle, or what would be the expectation? I guess if there isn't enough parking, I think you would probably have trouble renting that unit, since there's not really much adjacency for, on-street parking, considering the limitations on Drexel.
You're exactly right. Through his various entities, Mr. Woodling has done several of these, and I wanted to point those out. We have senior apartments at Hillside Senior Apartments, Northwest Senior Apartments, Millard Senior Apartments, and then on 132nd and Fort, just like you mentioned, senior apartments also being developed. And those also have similar 1-to-1 parking ratios. So he's received a reduction in the parking ratio for the reasons that we just articulated. And in none of those developments has overflow parking been a problem. And again, it's for the reasons that we articulated. The average demographic of a 55 and over housing development is a 75-year-old single female. And even if it is a 2-bedroom, they're living there by themselves. 30% of that demographic doesn't drive or own a car. Again, that supports the argument for a reduction in the parking stalls. And again, because our client has developed several of these, 132nd and Fort is probably the most similar, and he has not had an issue with that, is why he's asking for the 43% reduction.
And follow up there on sure. So, on those other apartment units that they have, are those on a public transit route?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Because there's no public transportation accessible to this development.
Correct.
Right. That makes a difference. The other thing too is, what about visitors that come to visit the people that are living there as well?
It's my understanding is it's 57 parking stalls total, correct?
57 total, right. So
right.
if you're full with 50 units, and let's say it's 1.5 cars per unit, right? You're over already, and if you get visitors, it's going to be a challenge. What was the decision, why was the decision made not to keep with the 100 parking stalls? What was that based on?
Just based on the data and the experience that my client has already had. The opponent spoke about assumptions. Well, we're not making assumptions with this project because my client has developed at least 4 similar projects with a reduced parking
But you
ratio.
are making an assumption. You're assuming that people that are living there, some of them don't drive. But if they don't drive, they have to get from point A to point B somehow, some way, right? And most of the time, it's probably going to be public transportation.
And we
There is
don't
none.
know about the point Mike asked earlier, if the other ones that you cited have public transportation to them.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's one in Millard, Northwest, and Hillside, and I can't tell you the addresses or the public transportation access of those developments.
Well, I'm familiar with
There's
a
certain
couple
assumptions
of
made in
those
all developments, of
situations.
course.
I assume they're on bus routes because they're on a major thoroughfare there, and closer to the core of the city as well. This is
a tough deal.
Yeah.
Are you limiting? I think Eric had asked this question. I don't know if it was answered. Will you limit the number of cars that each unit can have? Like, let's say you get to a situation and there's 55 cars in your parking lot every single day. I mean, then what?
I think those,
Or 65?
we haven't got to the stage where we're developing the leases yet, but I think that those issues would have to be addressed in the lease agreement with the tenant, certainly.
And one follow-up, I would assume that parking stalls are not designated to specific units. It's just an open parking lot.
That's my understanding.
Without parking allowed on either side of Drexel, there's no room for overflow parking.
Well, I think and perhaps Ryan has more information on this. I think there's only a segment of Drexel Street that doesn't have the parking on both sides.
Well, I
When you
thought
get
that-
further west, you do have parking on one side.
Once you get to the top of the street, then it opens up, but that's quite a
So-
walk. Yeah.
Well,
Is that
so I
correct?
guess is the concern from the board where the vehicles would go?
Sure. Congestion,
Okay.
you know, as far as maybe drop off and pick up as well. You know, when you've got now, they kind of use 2 lanes on the one way to drop off or go through. Now you've got cars blocking a part of that, and so now you're going to have, I think, a flow issue.
But if you do have a visitor that doesn't have a parking stall at the apartment complex, and they come at a time of school drop-off, which is a short window, I mean, they're just having to park further and just walk themselves. I mean,
if it's a
it is
visitor.
a public street network that does have parking when you go further west.
Sure. Yeah, I understand, but I'm not just talking about visitors, I'm talking about if you have 50 units and you have 70 cars. I mean, that plus visitors. And I don't know, they've done it before, but maybe they are on a route. Maybe they have off-street parking that is on both sides of the street, adjoining or adjacent to their property. I'm not sure without, seeing how they've worked it. Yeah, I'm not concerned about the traffic necessarily. I am concerned that there's not going to be adequate parking on this site, the way just from my lens.
That's also what I was saying as
The way
well.
that I see it. And the original plan was 100 parking stalls, and now you're reducing it to 57. You had the 100 in there for a reason.
Well, no, that's the code requirement. They never proposed that.
But again, I'm going to get back to if your demographic information is correct with regard to who resides in these types of units, people will want public transportation if they don't, because if they know that there's not public transportation, they're probably not going to be a tenant here, so they'll have cars. So I think there is a need to increase that parking. I'm not saying to 100 necessarily, but maybe on a 1.5 ratio, which would bring us to what, 75?
Well, I would also just ask, were parking waivers sought on the other projects as well? Is this just a typical practice for this type of housing? Because you guys know, as you are experienced, that there are just that many less trips, there are that many less drivers?
I can answer the question of the waivers. Yes, there have been previous cases with waivers. I know specifically 132nd and Fort, and I know Rob has received waivers otherwise. Because that ratio for multifamily is applicable to all parts of the city except for CBD and MBD zoning, which is not where these developments are. So whether it was done through a PUR or whether it was done through the ZBA, most
And-
of his sites have had parking waivers. I
And
can
correct
say.
me if I'm wrong, but the city doesn't hand out parking waivers this significant to just anybody. I mean, it's not easy to get on projects. So that's why I was asking, just to familiarize myself more with the product type and the parking requirements and the common practices.
Yeah, I can say if this was just a standard apartment building that, was not age restricted for seniors, we would not support the reduction that you're seeing here in this location.
Can you answer the question of whether his other developments are sitting on public transportation?
We can't. I'm gonna jump in. This is nice. I didn't know I could turn on my light and just start talking. So you're all in trouble now, so.
You seriously just learned that?
Well, I just didn't learn it. Maybe I just never have done it. So, Eric or Mike can maybe remember, I mean, the one on 132nd Sailor just went through a couple months ago, if not last month or the previous month. It's on 132nd Sailor. I don't know if there is a bus route. We didn't check on that. But they're surely not parking on 132nd, right? So if there's any overflow parking on that one, it has to be on Sailor. We engaged Rob on that project and had them look at a street or at least a driveway connection to the commercial center to the south. The grade didn't work, so we got a sidewalk connection. So the one on 132nd Sailor, which is just north of Maple, doesn't have overflow parking capabilities anyway. The one on 132nd and Fort is tucked behind, I think it's a Fairway Food Mart there. It is isolated. There's no public streets around it. Again, it's east of 132nd Street, north of Fort. It's tucked behind the Fairway Food Mart. There's no chance for on-street parking. So that, I don't do Rob's model, but we've seen Rob's model work in the past. There's no opportunity for those folks to park on an adjoining street. So again, Rob's done 3 or 4 or 5 of these around the city. He's proven that he knows his clientele, and he's been pretty successful on placing these in the city. And to my knowledge, we have not received any parking complaints with any of his projects.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and thank you for that, but I don't necessarily agree with the assessment of it. Because I drive through my neighborhood, trying to avoid playing bumper car with cars that are parked on the street. If we can avoid having any on-street parking wherever we can, I'm all for that. I know we can't, but it does pose a danger. And the parking, if you're gonna have overflow parking on the streets, there is a little bit of distance between the parking in the development and where they're gonna have to park. Because you can't park until you get past the school on site there. So again, I'm not necessarily saying 100 stalls, but I think you could probably make some sort of an adjustment to the plan where you can increase the parking to at least a 1.5 ratio. Just my opinion on that, to avoid at least some of the concerns that we have. And again, if there's no public transportation and your demographics are correct, people are going to have cars because they can't get anywhere otherwise. And correct me if I'm assessing this wrong, but how do they get from point? And there's storage units to the south, and you got a school to the north, but there's no shopping across the street. But they're not going to cross that busy Harrison Street. That's a disaster. So I do have concerns, as you can tell. I do have legitimate concerns, and I appreciate you raising those concerns. And very familiar with the site, and it's congested just very few times of the day, school hours, right, before and after school. My concern isn't the congestion.
If anyone had a concern, and no one raised it here, except the opponents did, as far as the safety of the students and congestion and things like that, we're talking about moving it from 3 commercial office buildings to a 50-unit apartment complex for seniors. I think that our development greatly reduces the congestion and the traffic that you would have with 3 commercial office buildings. You're talking hundreds of employees, and who knows what kind of businesses it would be, but obviously customers and clients. So to that point of the opponents, I think that this development actually is a safer alternative with less congestion.
Don't disagree at all with that assessment. Doesn't necessarily mean that we'd approve the office. develop it either, for the same reason.
Looking to wrap this up, does everybody have their questions answered or a comment to make? Or are you good? Were you gonna make, go ahead.
I think an element of this is like self-regulating because no one's gonna rent if they can't get there and if their family can't get there. So again, I think my concern is not so much the traffic or if somebody has to park far away. I don't think a lot of people are gonna be doing that realistically. I was trying to really more understand if this was a push to get more units and that's all it was, or is this a common practice for this type of development? It seems like there's precedent here that, there is less parking. I am familiar with these other projects too in different parts of the city. And so I'm ultimately probably going to support this, but I just wanted to understand a little bit further because I do think that 100 to 57 stalls is a sort of a significant jump that I wanted to understand better and maybe give the opponents some comfort in that, this is just what's typically done for these types of developments and that there's no problem. Yes, maybe there was an office here. This is a separate point. It could have been repurposed to be any number of different developments that are not a senior development, which could have actually resulted in a actual negative impact on the neighborhood. And seeing as office is not so hot these days, it could have been anything. I think it's good that it's a senior development ultimately. So that's my comment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I apologize if you thought I was trying to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I think I did okay.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, so I have some more
Go ahead,
comments. One of my planners who's watching on the screen indicated that 132nd and Fort and 132nd and Sailor are not specific transit stops. Now, I don't know how far they are away from any potential bus stops, but I just wanted to add that. Last month, the 100... Okay, thank you. 132nd and Sailor last month, so that was 50 units, 64 parking stalls on that one. So this is slightly less. I don't know about the Fort Street. I think what's maybe getting lost in the conversation a little bit is the affordable housing aspect. Rob is providing 40 of the 50 units at affordable housing. That is something very common that we are hearing. Providing extra parking areas is more expense. That does chip away and makes it difficult when you have affordable housing. So that's going to be a common theme that we'll continue to hear. In fact, when we bring our housing plan to you next month, which we talked about a little bit this morning in the pre-meeting, there's many comments about that within that document and just recommendations that the city should consider looking at parking ratios. I guess if there is a visitor that comes, I understand if it's residents and they don't have a permanent place to park, I understand that can be challenging. If it's a visitor, can they walk 1 or 2 blocks? I mean, you go to different parts of the city and sometimes you have to walk 3 or 4 or 5 blocks, when you're visiting somebody. And I'm just throwing that out there for conversations. Obviously, where the city stands on our support of the waiver of both this site and other ones that we've done for other senior living facilities, which includes Rob's projects, but not just him. It's other developers as well. So I guess I just wanted to add those comments to consider. So I'll read our recommendation. You already have it, of course, but staff recommends approval of the major amendment to the Falcon Ridge Mixed-Use Development Agreement, subject to submittal of 5 acceptable signed copies of the amendment prior to City Council.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the major amendment to the Falcon Ridge Mixed-Use Development Agreement, subject to submittal of 5 acceptable signed copies of the amendment prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Pate,
No.
Sotolongo,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Franklin. Yes. Moore,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
No.
Approved 5-2.
Okay, moving along, agenda item number 24, case C7-22-279, applicant First United Methodist Church of Omaha, request approval of a major amendment to the presumed conditional use permit pursuant to section 55883Q. Gerald, could you please take your conversation out? No, that's okay. That's okay. Okay. Request approval of a major amendment to the presumed conditional use permit pursuant to section 55883Q to allow religious assembly in the R1 district. Location 7020 Cass Street. Is the applicant here?
Afternoon, my name's Bob Delzell. I live at 2411 North 155th Street, and I'm here representing First United Methodist Church. We're asking to install an electronic sign on our property. It's at 7020 Cass Street. Basically, we're on the north side of the street for 2 blocks there. The south side is basically the Omaha Playhouse, Omaha Conservatory of Music, and then a Walgreens drugstore, I'm sorry. The Playhouse currently has an electronic sign, and we're asking for a waiver to allow the sign. And is there anything else I need to say? I'm sorry, I've never done this before.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, close public hearing. Comments, questions from the board? Eric?
So we didn't place this on consent. Bob, I don't know if you've seen the recommendation report. Okay, so we are recommending some modifications, a little bit smaller in height, a little bit smaller in size, and some parameters. So just want to make sure you are aware of that. Okay. So yeah, so, as I kind of just mentioned there, we do have some recommendations as far as turning off the sign at night, following operating parameters that we consistently apply when we see these types of signage waiver requests, such as brightness, dimming, differential, duration, no scrolling video, things like that. So along with making it a little bit shorter and a little bit smaller, but we are supportive of the waivers as recommended in our recommendation report. So I don't know if you have any questions, but staff recommends approval of the major amendment to the conditional use permit subject to the 13 conditions. And like I said, it will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals as well.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the major amendment to the conditional use permit assumed, subject to the following 13 conditions in the report.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Franklin? Yes. Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Solongo?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
And I think we're at agenda item number 26, our final item. Agenda item number 26, case C7-22-281, applicant Plaza 93 Apartments LLC. Request approval of a major amendment to the presumed conditional use permit pursuant to section 55-883Q to allow multiple family residential in the CC district. Location 3230 North 93rd Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon. Still afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Ann Post. I'm an attorney with Rumboldt Ludke Law Firm located in Lincoln, Nebraska at 1128 Lincoln Mall. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, Plaza 93 Apartments LLC, for the major amendment to the presumed CUP. This is for the building located at 3230 North 93rd Street. This building was built in approximately 1975. Since then, it has been commercial on the first floor with the upper 2 floors, second and third floor as residential. This building was relatively recently acquired by Plaza 93 Apartments, and we are seeking to convert the first floor into residential units. We are seeking to convert the first floor into 30 efficiency residential units. These will be market rate apartment units. The construction activity will be contained mostly within the building, so the current residents will see as little impact as possible, and also as little impact as possible to the surrounding neighborhood. There is with, as is a condition that we are aware of, one of the conditions, with the showing additional bike parking, there is adequate parking on site for these additional units. And so we are aware, as I stated, we are aware of the list of conditions to approval for this application. We have reviewed them and the applicant is agreeable to those. With that, I guess I will answer any questions. Also, we have the architect and the developer with me here today to answer any other questions that are better directed to them. So, any questions?
Thank you, Ann. Any other proponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, close public hearing. Additional comments, questions from the board? Eric?
Yeah, so, we had received 1 or 2 letters, so that's why we kept it off consent, but, staff doesn't have any concerns. As Ann had mentioned, there's a few items in the report, a few landscaping clarifications and items that'll need to be cleared up before any submittal for building permits. So staff recommends approval of the major amendment to the presumed conditional use permit to allow multiple family residential subject to the 6 conditions.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the major amendment to the presumed conditional use permit pursuant to section 55-883Q to allow multiple family residential in the CC district subject to the 6 conditions in the report.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Franklin? Yes. Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Solongo?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Approved 7-0.
Okay. Do we have a motion on last month's minutes for the pre-meeting and the public meeting?
I move to approve the last month's pre-meeting minutes and the meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Solongo?
Abstain?
Franklin?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Abstain.
Mr. Chair?
Abstain.
Thank you.
Right.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, please record the vote.
Morris? Pate?
Yes.
Solongo?
Yes.
Rosacker? Franklin?
Yes.
Moore?
Dave,
Mr.
is this
Chair?
yours? Yes.
Okay.
Okay.